kind of interesting. This is one of those time periods where a huge step backwards in technology is actually adopted with something. In 1870, what was the fastest way to get across the Atlantic? Ship, right? Steam or sail? In 1870, 1880, 1890, steam, right? Believe it or not, this is like the little nugget of, wow. There was a class of ship that was developed. It was a cargo ship, even though it couldn't really carry that much. The class of ship was called a clipper, like the Cutty Sark, most famous clipper, because I think it's like the only one that's still in existence. I don't remember if they had a metal or a wooden hull, but what set the clippers apart from other ships was the number of yards of sail that they had. The clippers had far more sail for the weight of the ship than anything in the age of sail, and as a result, the fastest ship on transoceanic voyages up until much, much, much later were actually the clippers. There you go. How many of you guys have ever heard of clippers before? Not the basketball team. Okay, but you know that's actually what the basketball team is named for. Was that class of ship? Very, very light, very quick. Okay, so there you go. So maybe something to consider with this, because the speed of transport across the Atlantic, because going across the Atlantic was so much faster now than it had ever been before, relations between the Americas and Europe really get a lot closer. So you start getting, you know, the art styles start to synchronize during this time period. You can see the politics in Europe impact what goes on in America a little bit more, so on and so forth. And so a common feeling, attitude during the one time period, you're going to find it on both sides of the pond. So generally speaking, here's one of the trends that's gone on, moving into the 1871 time period up through World War I. What happens to the number of hours per week that people work? It's decreasing, right? So people work fewer hours. What happens to the number of children able to work? It goes down drastically. Okay? So children are no longer allowed to work in the factories the way they had before in the first industrial revolution. Fewer hours are being worked in the factories. You have an increase of automation that takes place. Okay? So more work is done by machines in factory work than ever had been before. So what happens to the productivity of each worker? The amount of stuff that each hour of worker, the amount of stuff that can be created, what happens to their productivity? It goes up, okay? So, fewer hours, what that actually translates into is fewer days per week that people are working. Productivity goes up. Now the wages actually don't go up that much. But what happens to the cost of manufactured goods? It goes down. More stuff is made. It's sold for less money. People are bringing in about as much money, maybe a little bit more money. So what happens to the amount of money that they're taking home? It increases. So for the first time, you have mass of people in society with a little bit of disposable income and a little bit of extra time. Make sense? So what kinds of things are created to deal with this? In America, it's easy to see in America some of these things. What? Sports. Wrigley Field have no lights. I mean, I think they have lights at Wrigley Field now. But do any of you guys know when were lights actually installed at Wrigley Field? Okay, one of you guys get out your cell phone and look up when were lights installed. Let me see if I can do it.
Gotta go fast.
Siri.
Oh, look, it was one of the first suggestions. August 8th, 1988.
1988? 1988. Okay. I was in high school when they finally put lights in at Wrigley Field. You know, consider how many 100 years. You know, the last time that the Cubs won the World Series was 107 years ago, right? It was 108. It was like 100 or 1900 something. Okay, so the Cubs and minor league teams were set up all across America. Every town would get some professional sports team, and so on those days off, you start seeing the creation of leisure activities where families could go to Coney Island in New York. They could go to museums. They could go to parks. They could go to beaches. They could go to sporting events. You actually start seeing the very beginning sense of leisure time, and it's wonderful, and people love it. It looks really beautiful. I mean, never mind the fact that, you know, people riding bicycles, these brand new cars, things like that are driving on rubber tires. The rubber was being harvested using worse than slave labor in the Belgian Congo, but you know, we never pay attention to that. Food quality before the Food and Drug Administration was created in the United States. Food quality was absolutely savage, just nasty. Next year, when you guys are in U.S. history, you're probably going to spend a little bit of time looking at The Jungle, which is a book by, is Upton Sinclair or Sinclair Lewis? It's something, Sinclair is one part of his name. One guy wrote Main Street, the other guy wrote The Jungle, and I can never keep them right. But it was an expose on the food industry, the creation of food. It was nasty. You know, Otto von Bismarck's quote, the less that people know about how laws and sausages are made, the better they'll sleep at night. Sausage was one of those things you would not want to eat sausage unless you made it yourself. Nasty stuff. So there's definitely some bad parts of industrialized world, whether it was things going on elsewhere around the world, whether it was the fact that you did still have people that were homeless and unemployed and unemployable, and in the era before a social safety net, if someone was injured on the job, they would simply die, and that was the reality. So, in Europe, the time period is referred to as La Belle Époque. What is belle in French? What does it translate as?
Beautiful.
Beautiful, okay? How about epoch? Epoch, E-P-O-C-H. What does that mean? It's a time, it's a period. La Belle Époque translates as the beautiful time, okay? And so, generally, the general overarching attitude that people had during this time, this is the beautiful age. In America, a certain author with the birth name of Samuel Clemens, better known as Mark Twain, comes up with the term the Gilded Age. Okay, if something is gilded, what has happened to it?
Coated in gold.
It has been coated in gold. Okay, gilt, gold. Okay. Mark Twain refers to the time period as if it is a gilded picture frame, where the wood is rotten, but it's been covered with a veneer of gold, so that it looks like it's pretty, even though it's really truly rotten at the core. I would strongly advise you guys, memorize these two terms. Gilded Age, La Belle Époque. It is probably the best way to classify this time period, because because both terms, they match both in what's going on in America as well as what's going on in Europe at the same time period. La Belle Epoque, I've got it written up here somewhere. La Belle Epoque and the Gilded Age. Now, something else that's going on during this time period is we're starting to see the transition between the modern age. What age is it that replaces the modern age? It's the one that we live in today, by the way. The modern age is replaced, modernism is replaced by modern. What's going to come after modern? Postmodern.
Oh my God.
You guys have ever heard of postmodern? This is the time period that we're dealing with. Okay, so modernism, you know, we have a history of modern Europe from the Renaissance to the present. When does the modern age start? From the Renaissance, okay? The modern age starts in the Renaissance. So here's what modern means. What defines truth? In pre-modern Europe, what defined truth was some kind of authority, whether it's the church, whether it's the government. Once you get the Renaissance, you've got this greater sense of humanism and individualism. You have individual research. You have the likes of Copernicus doing scientific research, Galileo developing a telescope. The scientific revolution is part of this. So what defines truth in the modern era is rational thought, evidence, science. Everything is supposed to be able to make sense. Newtonian physics is like the cornerstone, the ultimate of the modern era. It makes sense. It's rational thought. Okay? Pre-modern, modern. The transition starts to happen somewhere around the late 1800s. And the three big thinkers that we always kind of go to about this, I mean, Darwin, Charles Darwin, really truly is modern. He observes, he looks at things, comes up with a theory based on what he observes. Okay? So maybe Darwin himself is modern, although a lot of the theories that are based on Darwin would be considered postmodern. Okay? Truth is not necessarily absolute. It doesn't necessarily make sense. You know, Einstein's physics, what? When things approach the speed of light, they expand in size and slow down. What? It just doesn't make sense. Darwin. And spin off from Darwin, moving into social Darwinism, ultimately into racial nationalism, things like that. That's something you start getting with postmodern. The two other philosophers that change everything. The latest of the three is Freud, Sigmund Freud. Now, prior to Freud, if a man sees a woman, desires her, assaults her, tears her clothes off, and rapes her, in the eyes of the law, he's broken the law. In terms of religion, he's just commit sin. Okay? He has consciously done things. Does that make sense? And so, of course, it's easy to punish him because, yeah, he did that. He should have known better. Right? Freud's ideas challenge all of this. Now, for one thing, Freud is obsessed with sex. And you know, we'll talk about a little of Freudian psychology here in a little bit. You know, the whole thing that you can access what's inside a person's brain, inside their mind, based on, you know, examining their dreams and stuff. Yes?
Was he the one with like the Oedipus complex?
The Oedipus complex, yeah, he pushed that. We'll talk about that. So one of the big challenges of Freud to the rest of society is Freud presented the idea that there's these three competing drives inside of every person. You have, what are they?
Ego, superego.
The id, ego, and the superego. So the id is the pleasure principle. The ego is the reality principle, and I don't remember what kind of principle the superego is, except that it's like your morality, your conscience, okay? If I take one of my kids, you know, Desmond is 4. He does not yet understand a lot of what he's doing. If I take Desmond to the grocery store, as we're going by the checkout stand where they have all of the candy, what is he going to do?
Trying to take.
He's going to grab one. And actually his thing right now is Tic Tacs. For whatever reason, you know, in the stockings at Christmas, we all got Tic Tacs. And so, of course, he made a point of taking a thing of Tic Tacs. Carolyn walks downstairs, and like 30 minutes after we've opened up the stockings, he has an entire thing of Tic Tacs that he's eaten, all of them, because of course he's 4. So Carolyn, you know, comes down and says, well, you ate all of your Tic Tacs. No. What? Dad's Tic Tacs. It's like, no. Okay, so a little kid sees the candy. The pleasure principle is, I want that candy. Little kid grabs the candy. Okay? The man sees the woman, desires the woman. If you're only following the pleasure principle, the man is going to take the woman, okay, and do whatever he wants to do to her. That's the pleasure principle. And that's one of those things, according to Freud at least, that's one of those things that we all have in us. We have this desire to take certain things that we want. The next principle is the ego. It's the reality principle. And frankly, when we are teaching children, we're kind of playing to Freudian psychology. If my kid grabs the candy at the checkout line, what am I going to do? I'm going to put it back. I might slap him on the hand. I might threaten him with severe bodily punishment, or something else like that. Give him a little swat on the behind. Give him a timeout. Give him a stern talking to, something like that. So that the reason that he does not take that candy is the fear of the punishment that's going to come. According to this, according to Freud, the reason that the man is not going to assault the woman and try to have his way with her is because he is afraid of the punishment that he's going to receive from the government, from her family, from whatever it is. Does that make sense? Okay. The highest level here is the superego. What I want my kids to be able to do, when we walk through the checkout stand, even if my kids have the ability to take a candy bar and no one ever see it, I want them to leave the candy there because I want them to think, that candy's not mine. It would be stealing, it would be wrong for me to take that. You want that man to look at the woman and might think, yes, she's attractive, but I'm not going to do anything to her because that's wrong. Because I've made promises to other people that I'm not going to do anything, because she has her own rights, because I'm going to respect her rights, and that would simply be wrong. You know, so according to Freud, you got these 3 different competing things inside you. That totally flies in the face of the idea of individual people doing right or wrong because they make the decision to do right or wrong. So that's Freud. Make sense? Freud. Now, the next one, or the last one, is Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche was a German a German dude. And he was heavily inspired by a lot of the ideas, a lot of contemporary ideas of Darwin and of social Darwinism. Nietzsche believed that there was a master race. Now, for one thing, Nietzsche is one of those people, a lot of people will quote Nietzsche in their yearbooks because there seem to be really, really good Nietzsche quotable lines that people are going to use. That which does not kill me only makes me stronger. You know, and of course we've all heard that. And so, because that's what most Americans can pay attention to, because we're stupid people, that's what we pay attention to rather than the rest of his beliefs. Nietzsche believed in some kind of a God, definitely not a Judeo-Christian God. He believed that some God created mankind. Mankind was the ultimate creation of God. And that God wanted mankind to rise up and be great and be powerful and reach some great kind of a position, the pinnacle of something. Okay? His problem with Christianity and Judaism, again, in Europe at that time period, those are the predominant religions, Christianity and Judaism. His problem with those two religions is that the religions call for people to care for those around them, to care for the widows and orphans in their distress. In other words, those people that are poor, those people that are homeless, those people that are widows and orphans, that's one of those groups of people that Christianity calls on people to care for. According to Nietzsche, all that does, he referred to Christianity as a slave religion, because it makes people slaves to the weakest of society. Therefore, probably his most controversial statement was that what following a religion like Christianity has done is that it has made mankind take from the strongest of society and give to the weakest in society that probably should have died off. And therefore, it has weakened those that are strong. It has made the human race weak. And because mankind is the ultimate creation of God, it has ultimately destroyed the ultimate purpose of God in making man. And so what human society has done is kill God. Quote, God is dead, and we have killed him, end quote. That's Nietzsche. Now, he actually goes on from there in, I don't know exactly like how many books he wrote, but one of his most famous books, the German title is Also Sprach Zarathustra. Translated into English, it is Also Spoke Zoroaster, Zoroaster being a deity in an ancient Iranian, Persian religion. This book that Nietzsche wrote so inspired Richard Strauss, who was a German composer. So this German composer took the second bit, the second philosophy, or the follow-up philosophy from Nietzsche, and wrote a piece of music entirely, specifically, directly based on Nietzsche's work. Okay, so if mankind is supposed to be great and powerful and awesome, if we have generation after generation taken from the powerful and given to the weak, first of all, we need to stop doing that. So here's what's going to happen. This was his dream, is stop charity. Charity is stupid. If someone is too poor to be able to care for themselves, they need to die out. Because what's going to happen is that they're going to stop sucking up resources from everyone else. And frankly, at some point, a conflict will break out. The question is, what's going to happen as a result of a conflict? Now, by the way, Nietzsche's ideas led directly to the Nazis, just as Darwin's ideas led directly to social Darwinism and led directly to racial nationalism. Nietzsche's ideas lead directly to the Nazis. You've got mail. So, Nietzsche says a struggle is going to come. And in that struggle, there will be a lot of death and destruction and things like that. But if you overcome the struggle, that which does not kill me only makes me stronger. And actually, if you look at a mass scale, so also Sprach Zarathustra by Richard Strauss. So the struggle is going to happen. The struggle is going to occur, and the question is, what is going to emerge as a result of the struggle? This is the piece of music, by the way. What is going to emerge from the struggle? Well, what's going to emerge is a new race of mankind. Not this weak race of mankind that we have now, but what is going to come is, in German, die Übermensch, which translates as Superman. In other words, the guy with the S on his shirt, that's where that term comes from. When the Nazis are talking about the master race, this is what they're talking about. This is what this piece of music is written for.
It's too much to take.
This is not written as a movie score in 1969. This is written for Friedrich Nietzsche's book, also Sprach Zarathustra. Head blown, right?
This is copyright music.
Now, I mean, really, this is a great piece of music. And one of the things that's so amazing about it is how well it fits the philosophy of the book. Right? Kind of makes you think a little bit differently about this piece of music if you really, truly look at it. So the Nazis are saying, let the war come. Now it's interesting, you know, Nietzsche was not a Nazi. Unlike most of the academics of his time, I don't even think that Nietzsche was anti-Semitic, which is interesting. I read a really interesting, well, a bit of a really interesting book. I was supposed to read the whole book, and of course I didn't because I was a college student at the time. Man's Search for Meaning was a book by Viktor Frankl, came up with a certain class of psychology. Frankl was Jewish, was taken in the, Frankl, as a German Jew in the 1930s, was arrested by the Nazis and spent a good chunk of World War II in a concentration camp. And unlike most of the people around him, he actually survived. And one of the interesting things, one of the interesting things in what he wrote, we have our big Exodus now. One of the things that helped him focus on survival was to consider his experience in the concentration camp as the struggle. This is the struggle. I am going to overcome this. And so it's almost as if he was using the philosophy of Nietzsche to beat the Nazis, which, you know, it's interesting that it's not, you know, it's not a direct that Nietzsche was a Nazi, because he wasn't, but this is the philosophy that largely does give the Nazis a lot of their you know, their focus and stuff. So there you go, those three ideas: Nietzsche, Freud, Darwin. Now, obviously, you go a little bit further with postmodernism. Where it really starts to break is World War I. All of the logic should have said that World War I should have been, you know, a war, and it was going to be over and logical, and then yay, and after World War I, you have an entire generation of people that are so completely traumatized by the war. Nothing makes sense. Nothing is logical. You know, logic just means pain. And so you have an entire generation of post-traumatic stress. And then the philosophy moving in the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, where truth is now relative. And that's one of the cornerstones that we have now with postmodernism. So, and I think probably the most fitting understanding, the election that we just had, the entire election campaign from all sides, there is no absolute truth. You know, what is truth? You know, what is fake news? Fake news is anything that you don't agree with, whether you're coming from the right or from the left. So there you go. That's the ultimate postmodernism.